Record now.
That's super. Well, very, very warm welcome to you all. I'm Sarah Knight. I'm going to be introducing today's webinar. I'm very pleased you could join us if you are working with us on our digital experience insights. And the purpose of today is to give you a little bit of background around the service, but most importantly, to hear from Mark in terms of the tips and the guidance that is there to help you through the process and ensure that at the end of the day, you're able to get as much benefits from running insights from your staff and your students that will really inform you in taking forward your digital development. So lovely to have you all with us. I did ask everyone just to add their details in the chat window if you have just joined, just so we know where you're from and which institution you're representing today. So if we move on to the next slide, Mark, I just thought it would be useful for you to actually see the team behind Insights, and we have our colleagues that are working to support you in your use of the service, and that includes Ruth Drysdale, who is our service manager. Obviously myself and Mark are here with you today, along with Claire, who is our content manager, and some of you have met or may have met through your interviews around the case studies that Claire has been writing around the use of Insights. Darren is our client support officer and is the person that you'll be getting emails from in terms of getting you started and ensuring that we have all the documentation for you to start your use of Insights. Lola's working with us currently in exploring some of the other options around Insights. So some of you may have seen an email from me that's gone out around exploring the requirements for a researcher Insights survey. So that's something we'll say a little bit about later. So if we move on to the next slide, Mark. So today is really just a general background and introduction to Insights. And then more importantly, it's very much about hearing how to get going with Insights and what we need to be doing to making sure we're maximising the value that we get from our surveys, looking at the way that we can engage our staff and students around the use of the surveys. And then I will finish off at the end with a few updates around new developments relating to Insights and also some next steps. If we move on to the next slide, Mark. So a little bit of background just to introduce you on. And I think I get asked this question a lot, and so does the team, from those that are interested in running Insights, in terms of, so what does Digital Insights do? What is its real value? And its real value actually goes back to some of the early work we've been doing around engaging students and staff in developing a digital environment that goes back really to 2005 with some of our initial JISC research, but ways in which we can better engage our students in discussions around the digital environment. There is still so many misconceptions that get made around how students use technology, and myths saying actually they're all digitally capable, you know, we don't need to offer them any support. And what our digital student work has brought to the fore over the past few years is that that is very much not the case. We actually need to be ensuring that we know how our students are making use of the technology that we provide within our college or in our university. And we need to have that evidence so we can actually feed that back in to our senior leaders when they are looking for evidence about return on investment in digital. We know, for example, that AOC, Association of Colleges, did a survey last year where the average investment an FE college in England was making was around about £900,000 a year. Now that's a considerable investment in our resource constrained time, and we really need to know if that investment is being made in the right places. Are students and staff benefiting from the technology we are providing? How are they using it? What can we do better? We also need evidence to inform the direction of our digital strategy within our college or university. Whether it's called a digital strategy or whether it's another word that you use, but a way in which we're actually bringing together a holistic vision for digital in our organisation and how we are achieving that. And again, the outcomes from both the teaching staff and student surveys are really invaluable in picking up evidence of progression on that journey, looking at how we can benchmark ourselves against other institutions, which is a really unique aspect, I think, of Insights and the online surveys tool that we use. But also, you know, something that comes up in every conversation, every conference, is looking at how we're identifying that digital skills gap within our organisation, because as we know, we can offer technology and we can hope that it's being used effectively, but we do know from all our research, both on Insights and also on our digital capability work, that there is this digital skills gap, and that staff and students do need support in developing their digital skills. So again, some really strong evidence around that. And of course, for higher education, that is evidence that we can start feeding into test submissions. It can start supporting institutions with ensuring that their NSS returns then are perhaps moving in the direction they want them to move in. And for colleges in particular, very strong evidence to feed back into evidence for self-assessments and also for Ofsted in terms of that engagement with students and development, co-development of the digital environment with them. So if we move on to the next slide, we very much say that this is more than just a survey. And if we move on to the next slide, it's very much built around a student and staff engagement process. Now we're going to try a poll, which I'm going to ask Mark to run, and it would just be really interesting just to get your responses on these questions in terms of whether you have or are involved in using the Digital Experience Insights, if you're using it, if you have used it before, or if you are just using it for this year. So you should see a poll on the screen. And if you're able to select the options and then click submit, and then we should be able to display a chart in terms of those submissions.
Can you see it at the moment, the results yet, Sarah?
Can't see the results. I've got the...
Okay, so everyone, we've got six of the 10. Anyone else to answer? Okay, it's not moving, so I'll do the end polling.
Brilliant.
Okay. Right, share results. Can we see them now?
Yeah, we can. Yes, right. Super.
So, majority there on both running staff and students. Quite
an interesting mix there in terms of those that never participated before either. So, thank you. That's really useful to know. Thank you. So, if we move on to the next slide. That just gives you an overview of our Insights service, and as some of you may be aware, if you started having a look at the questions, we have put together a tried and tested set of questions for both staff and teaching staff, for both students and teaching staff, that are made up of closed questions that can be benchmarked, so you're able to benchmark your results with those of other colleges and universities. We have some open questions in terms of some qualitative analysis that you can do, and those are brilliant for getting student quotes and starting to pick up themes that are coming through. And then we also have the option of you being able to add customized questions at a local level to pick up on the issues that you might want to find out more information on. As we've said, this is very much the start of a dialogue with your students and staff. It shouldn't just be seen as yet another survey that people are asked to fill in. It is very much about, this is a way that we can get better insight into how you are experiencing the digital environment within our institution. And from there, we will be coming back to you, whether it be focus groups, whether it be posters that we feed back to you on what we are doing or the areas that we want to highlight and what we're going to work with you on, but very much starting that dialogue and conversation about the issues. We have created a community of practice nationally around Insights and those that are using the service to gather their students and staff's expectations and experiences of technology, and we have students involved in that. We also are just about to launch an invitation to staff and students to join our expert panels. So once we have done an analysis at a national level, we then work with an expert panel made up of representatives from the community to give insights into the analysis that we're doing and to get their recommendations on how best we produce the final set of findings to make the most impact and the most take-up for our community. And students are very much sort of part of that process as well. I'll say a little bit more about professional services survey later on in terms of our next steps and also the research insights. But what we want to do is ensure that we have that 360-degree or holistic experience. So to be able to look at the findings coming through from our students, look at the findings coming through from our teaching staff, and through this year's pilot, our professional services staff, and really get a holistic picture of how the technology is being used within our organisation. The model there is very much showing that, you know, there is a flow and a cycle of improvement and enhancement at the centre, and then the purple layer around it is very much talking about the support and the guidance that we as GISC offer in relation to making the best use of those materials. So if we move on to our next slide, Mark. For those of you that are not aware, and this is something perhaps you might want to have a look at after the webinar, we have published the data from last year's findings, our 2017-18 report, and we had over 37,000 students participate, which is, you know, one of the largest surveys of its kind in relation to digital and students' expectations. We've got links on there to all the reports which you can download, as well as a summary. So hopefully as well some useful things and prompts that you can use in feeding this back to your senior leaders. Similarly for staff, we have run a short pilot that was with 15 institutions, and again nearly 2,000 teachers responded. It was fascinating, and I think, you know, the perspectives you get from students are fascinating, but equally to try it then and see the differences and similarities between what staff and students are saying within the same institution. It's really, really interesting. And again, the areas that were being picked up on staff were things like accessibility and inclusion, data protection, having time to develop digital skills. So some really important drivers there for us to consider as a sector in relation to how we can support staff better with this agenda. And finally, just released earlier in January, not last week, just that last week, our Digital Experience Insights report for Australia and New Zealand. We were fortunate to work with 13 universities in Australia and New Zealand, and again gathered over 21,000 student responses. Interesting to see some of the similarities and differences there. And again, you know, some really valuable feedback that we're able to obtain, and also to have that international dimension to the insights work that we're doing. Next slide, Mark. And hot off the press, this was launched last week, we have got some new reports and guidance that we've published on our website. And importantly, a really valuable piece of work that Tabitha Newman has produced for us. And Tabitha worked alongside Helen Beetham over the past 3 years with us on the development of the insights surveys and guidance around their use. And that is a really interesting paper now, the report, exploring what are the factors that make for an excellent digital experience for our students, and some really, really valuable research which has gone into that. So if you are interested in having a look at what makes for an excellent student digital experience, do have a look at that paper. We've also updated our GISC NUS roadmap, or what was called our benchmarking tool for the digital student experience. We've updated that, and we've published an updated version of that tool available from that link, with all the outcomes of our insights data from last year's report. And again, a really useful tool to start engaging students around what they feel an excellent student experience should be in relation to digital, and very much, again, useful as a checklist to see from a student perspective, but also from a staff perspective and an organisational perspective, where you feel you are on your digital journey. And then lastly, we know that senior leaders don't necessarily read lengthy booklets and research reports. And what we have done is sort of synthesised out some of the really key findings from our insights research to date. And again, summarise that in 4 sides of A4, which really, again, act as a checklist for institutions to think, okay, where are we in relation to the different areas of the insight survey that we are we are working with. So looking at things like access to infrastructure, looking at how we support students and the curriculum, looking at how we support our students in the development of their digital skills and our staff. So again, hopefully some really useful pointers and checklists that institutions can use to assess where they are, where they would like to move towards in terms of their digital journey, and some practical tips as well in terms of how to get there. So if we move on to that slide, I'm going to pause there before I hand over to Mark, just to see if there are any questions in the chat, but also if anyone would like to raise their hand as well, we can take the questions via the mic as well.
So I just unmuted everyone. So any questions?
No. Thank you, Claire, for putting all those links in the chat window. That's really appreciated. And also for mentioning, thank you, Claire. We have also, Claire's put a link there into our newly updated little service booklet, just sort of highlighting really what I've just said in terms of synthesizing the key messages in relation to insights and what it can do for you and your organisation. We have got a question: how many institutions are involved in insights this year? And we've got, on my last count, I think it was 79 institutions that are involved. I think, and Mark will tell me if it's right, but I've got 31 UK universities.
Is it 48 FE? I'm trying to remember
48 FE colleges, and there are still that are in the process of signing up.
And 2 from Australia on top of that.
Australia. So last year we had 83, so we're nearly close to reaching those same numbers. Which is really exciting. I think we've had about 16,000 student responses in to date, and nearly about 2,000 staff responses in actual survey returns. But Mark will say a little bit more about that in his session. Over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. This is going to be, obviously, the time we have quite brief. What this chart showing here is almost like a continual improvement process about how we go through the stages of the insight surveys and how getting to the end feeds through to the next year. So it kind of emphasizes the point where this is not a one-off project. This is something that's about continual improvement year on year. So especially for the people new to the service, the most important thing is the planning stage. It's actually the underestimated stage, it's the time-consuming stage, and it's the one that, if you can get right, makes the rest of it flow more smoothly. So you need to think about, obviously, things like budget, but also it's thinking about who your key stakeholders are. So you know, we can run the survey, but we really want to think about, okay, we get the results, but where can we take the results? You know, who are the people, the influencers? Who are the people where, when they show the results, then yes, we can actually make the changes on the ground, which is the crucial thing. Otherwise, to get the buy-in of students next time round when the survey happens again. So as part of that, you obviously need to think about your project group, your governance group. Also around that, a communication plan, which is about the engagement side. How are you going to engage your students and staff? What are the channels you're going to engage them through? You also maybe want to think about whether you want to offer prizes, and that's something we do have a survey where you can actually link students really to where they can actually complete an extra survey for a prize, and that the prize obviously be up to you. You want to think about the start and end dates as well. Obviously, as we know, the student survey is closing at the end of April, and the staff one at the end of June. And are you going to sample, or are you going to look at all your students? Will you look at 1 year in particular, or will you do all of them? So there's a lot of questions there about the planning stage, and obviously this year it's now getting a bit tight, but it's moving through those as quickly as possible. So once you've actually got access to the surveys, then you're going to, I mean, the question set itself is fixed, so there isn't anything to do there. But what we do offer is at the end, where you can add some customized questions, which may be specific to your institution. Obviously, you don't want to add too many questions there, otherwise it'll have a negative effect on response rates. Some of the questions you might want to ask locally is about looking at your faculty or departmental level, so you can break the results down locally. That's obviously a customizable question, because it varies by institution. And really, there isn't a lot to do here apart from adding that. It's making the copy of the survey, setting your customized questions, opening and closing, and then you're ready to launch. Actually, the work again around it's the planning, the engagement, the actual launching the survey part, it's relatively simple. And once it's launched, you're going to be monitoring the response rates to see if you actually load the emails into Boss. The option there is you can actually see which areas are responding and which people aren't, so you can still do a push as you go through to keep on raising the response rates. So once the survey closes, you've got the analyze stage. The data itself is, you can look at the data within, I say Boss, but it's now called GISC Online Surveys. You can download the data itself into Excel, which most people are familiar with, and carry out the analysis there. Some people want to use SPSS, statistical package. Some people want to use NVivo or other qualitative packages if you want to do that, but for most people, Excel is fine. You can also, within Boss, look at the benchmark to see how you compare to within your HE or FE sector, and how also the data looks compared to your NSS to see if there's any kind of relationship. I think with the data itself, what I'm actually building at the moment are templates which we used last year. So what will happen is I'll be sending out very soon, this week or next week, an Excel and a PowerPoint document. So when you get your results, you'll be able to plug or type in the results into the Excel spreadsheet, and it will automatically create the tables for you. And then those tables then can be copy and pasted into the PowerPoint presentation, which I'll send as well. And then this will act as a main report, which you can then show to your project group and your senior management to sort of win over, these people and be able to present the results in a concise but informative way. So then you've got the stage which is most crucial, is about actually looking at, well, you've got your results, but what does that mean in reality? What changes? What changes can you make on the ground? And how are you going to monitor those changes are happening? You want to feed back to the people who've completed the survey to say, this is almost along the lines of, this is what's been identified and this is what we're going to do. And this is where you talk about the circle here, because once you've actually done those changes, that's going to inform for next year the idea of your plan, your sampling, your communication plan, how you communicated the results from last year, who may be in your project team, governance, right through to, again, to the questions. You may have a customizable question that you want to ask then the following year based on what happened on the previous year. So the point I'm trying to make here, that it is kind of a continual circular experience there, building on year continuous improvement. Sarah already showed this template already. Just to say again, I think this emphasises all the support that is actually offered here, in the sense that we do work with expert panels, which Sarah said we'll be recruiting to soon. We provide the service templates. We've got links in this report about all the guidance we offer, and there's a whole wealth of material and other links within there of all the information we've built up over the years based on best practice and the guidance. And also you able to email us as well, or email me or Darren, who works for GISC Online Surveys, to ask any questions, any issues that come up. And obviously you then be able to get your national reports to see how the national picture looks like. The case studies are on there, some amazing case studies that Claire Killen's adding all the time, and I think they're really useful to look at, because you come across some of them and you go, that's a really good idea, that really applies to my institution, I might try this idea out for engagement, etc. So I'll stop for a second. Just wanted to see, I had a chance to look in the chat window. Any particular questions out there?
We had one from Caroline, Mark, and I said we'll follow this up with Caroline separately, just in terms of terminology that we're using in terms of our surveys. So
sure,
that's one we'll follow up.
Okay, right then, so we can move on.
Marketing materials, we do. We have got some marketing materials that we put together last year that are in the format of sort of Word and PowerPoint. I can make sure that we circulate those links. They may need adapting slightly, because obviously they were for last year, but we can look at what needs adapting in relation to that.
Yeah.
David, you've asked a question about, is there a recommended team structure for the project team? And I think this very much depends on which team is running and leading the insights work within your institution. I mean, from our experience, it does tend to be those staff that are involved in technology enhanced learning, e-learning team that form that central unit. But what is really important is that you think about the other stakeholders that this information is going to be shared with. So, for example, your IT department, thinking about a senior sponsor. So, is there a principal or a senior leader or a pro-vice chancellor that has responsibility for student experience and digital? And so starting to think about someone who is going to be taking these findings higher up. Library and learning resources are essential. You know, they're often the first point of contact that students go to, and they are, of course, are a great way and great advocates for actually supporting the dissemination of the survey as well. And then, you know, thinking about if you have got staff responsible for leading student engagement within your college or your university, if your university, thinking about your students' union, your student guild, student representatives, it's really important that, you know, they are aware that this work is happening, and also be involved in then looking at the outcomes of that and working with you on developing the enhancements that you might want to take forward.
I think I'd add as well, it might be useful thinking of the endpoint of actually bringing in, if you have a planning or especially business intelligence function, because those people may have capacity to be able to do some of the analysis for you and bring it into your internal data to, you know, produce like interesting insights, and maybe worth bringing them in at an early stage.
And I think not everyone will have access to all those different stakeholders within, you know, your context, but it is trying to sort of reference those different stakeholders that are relevant to you, that you know you've got access to, that you can draw support on, and get them interested and engaged. That's the important one as well. And thank you, Claire. There's some lovely examples as well that Claire's put in the chat window from Canterbury Christ College and the University of Stirling as well.
Okay, let's move on. Right. Some of you will already be familiar with this because you've gone through this process already, but let's go through it briefly for others that haven't. I think it's to demonstrate that basically to get going is a relatively easy process. So obviously a lot of you have submitted your expression of interest, and then you'll then receive a quote for cost, a sign-up forms and terms and conditions. When that's returned, the sign-up form, we send out a getting started. This is information asking what surveys you actually want for your institution, but also some kind of contextual information about your institution, about your digital strategy, about how many staff and students, and that provides something a bit more richer when we're looking at the data as well. Again, we're not looking at the individual institutional level, but more at sector level. Once we get the getting started form back and we have the sign up form, we can then provide you access to what we call the master copies of the survey, and you have those within the GISC online surveys account. And basically it's quite simple. Once you have those, you make your own copy, and this is all in the guidance about how to do it. You customize it if you wish to add the extra question, and you just launch the survey. And then they've got the dates at the end here for when the surveys are closed. So again, it's emphasising that it's more the preparation, it's more about engaging is the time-consuming bit. The actual running the survey itself is relatively simple. So a quick guide just to re-emphasise again. So you make your copies of the survey, you customise them if you wish to, preparing your engagement strategy, and then deciding who wants to do the survey. Again, as I mentioned, are you going to have all staff or students? Are you going to have a sample of them? And again, we talk about that in the guidance. And then to check the surveys, obviously it's really important. There's a tick list on GISC online surveys asking, is this the open date you want? Is this the close date? Are you sure about this? And then if you're 100% sure, then you can then go for it. But once the survey is launched, just to point out, it can't actually be amended. You can monitor the survey response rates and send reminders out to complete. Again, if you're just sending out a URL to people, then you won't be able to see who's completed and who hasn't, but you can just send out general reminders. You can, and again, we've got this in the guidance, you can upload emails into GISC online surveys, and then not necessarily, you can't see the people's responses or not, but you can see who's completed and who hasn't, and then send sort of personal reminders. Then you can close the survey, and again, as mentioned, you can then put this into Excel or SPSS and download the benchmarking results, carry out the analysis. Again, the templates I'm sending out, then you can then build the charts into PowerPoint, so presented to your senior management. And then the crucial thing to close that circle is to report and communicate, and to produce the reports, the findings and recommendations. And most importantly, not just to keep that within the senior management, but that it actually goes out to all the staff and students so they can see the issue, why, all the effort they put into completing the survey, what's actually come out of it, which is crucial, of course, because you want their engagement again next year as well. And I've got a link down here at the bottom for where all the guidance can be found. Again, it's very substantive in there within each of the documents, but if you have any further questions, you can email us as well at help@gisc.ac.uk. So, any questions? I mean, have all of you launched your surveys yet? Have you found any particular challenges? How are you engaging with your staff and students?
Mark, you've got a couple of questions. You've got one from David who's asking what sort of lead time should people allow for setting up the survey?
Oh God, that's a really difficult one because it depends on the institutions. I mean, if you're at the beginning of the year, then you may want, I mean, this a real stab in the dark, you may want a month or something, or to really have the time to to gather the people, or 2 months. But obviously now, and it's getting much closer to the time, so you're going to have to maybe really the next few weeks really gather together the key people and think about how you can quickly get the message out there that the survey is coming, which is going to obviously be by email. So it depends on the time of year and it depends on the institution.
I can give you a little bit of a clue from talking to some of the case study people in the city of Wolverhampton. Did it very quickly and found that the community of practice via the mailing list was helpful. People shared their promotional materials. I think from memory that it only took them about 3 weeks to get it up and running. And also London South Bank University, they were able to get theirs going pretty quickly with help from the community. So
just to echo that, Claire, I mean, I think we opened service in October because we have found that some of the universities and colleges have been most successful have used that window before Christmas to run the surveys with their students and got some very, very good returns. So there are not clashes with NSS. I think also to remember that you don't have to sample the same student cohort. NSS, you're looking at those students that are about to leave, whereas what we're looking with Insights is really those students that are new in. And so there's a very different very different sort of group of students that you're sampling. I think we found that, whether you open your survey and leave it open for 2 weeks or 2 months, you will probably get a similar number of returns. It's about how you send out those messages, how you build a campaign around it. And another really nice example that some of the colleges were using was using February as a month to run their surveys, to tie that into Internet Safety Week. So it is thinking about how this all ties in to activities that you have running within your college and university. If you are going to Insights now, it is not too late. There is a window, as Mark said, it's quite quick to get that process up and running of launching your surveys. And there's some excellent guidance in our Engaging Staff and Student Guide around how you can promote it using Twitter, your social media, posters in the library, canteens. There's some really innovative ways there that we can support you in terms of promoting that. And it is about getting the stakeholders on board as well in terms of thinking about, so what do I do with the analysis and the data once I've got those responses back.
And just to add, I would say that even though obviously this year you may not be able to put all the effort in that you could do next year, it's still worth running this year because you're getting your students and staff familiar with it, and it's a learning experience in itself to get going this year. And also, just to add about why closing in April, it's simply because we need the time to carry out the analysis for September. It's a lead-in time.
But
also say that for staff, the surveys remain open until end of June.
End of June, yeah.
So there is some windows there as well to encourage staff to participate. But for students, I think we do feel that there is a broad enough window from October through to the end of April to encourage that participation. If anyone is particularly concerned, please do email us. We'll have our contact details at the end. And, you know, please do let us know and we can have an individual follow-up phone call with you. Should I carry on then, Mark?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
in terms of next steps and new developments. Just to share there, as we've already mentioned, there are some great case studies there. You know, I know it's always hard to sort of go and do more reading and research, but between the case studies we've got, some of video, and the guidance documentation, you know, there is a wealth of information that we have gathered over running this for the past 3 years in terms of how institutions are addressing, and you know, we get asked these questions every year about scales, and you know, we have got some good examples of how institutions have overcome that. Some exciting developments in relation to our new insight surveys. We've got our professional service staff pilot that is about to launch in April. I know we've had volunteers from our current Insight subscribers involved in the development and feeding into the consultation process around that question set. And that's really exciting because we will then have a holistic picture, not just of teaching staff experience, but those other staff that are involved working in the library, working on student services, and you know, other IT, other aspects of the organisation. So we can really start to get that profile across different staff groups. We are also doing an initial scoping around researcher insights. It'd be really interesting if anyone is interested in participating in that initial scoping phase. Please do drop me myself an email. We know that in TEL, in the area that we're working in, I think this is something that is far more part of what we know we need to do. I think in terms of looking at it from a researcher perspective, that is quite perhaps a new agenda for institutions to be thinking about. So we are seeing whether we can look at developing something that goes across both teaching staff, professional services staff, and also including researcher views as well. Just to note, and apologies, we'll put the right website link in the chat window. There's a misspelt URL there that I haven't been able to pick up. So that should be digitalinsights.gist.ac.uk for our web link. There's a mistype there. Apologies for that. Move on to the next slide, Mark. Okay, great. So I hope that was, yes, really important. 22nd of May, a date for your diary. We have got our next community of practice event that's taking place in Birmingham. Those days are really valuable just to come together to hear what other institutions are doing in this space, to share experiences, for us to also to run some surgeries, particularly at that time of year when we can start to look about the analysis of the data, and you know, a good opportunity to really think about next steps in terms of what, now we've got the data, what do we do with it, how do we engage our stakeholders. And Claire has just put in the link into the chat window of where you can register for that. The agenda will be going up shortly. So I'll pause there. Also, sorry, just to say one last thing on the previous slide, Mark. Sorry, if you wouldn't mind just going back. Just because we have got an active blog, Mark produces monthly updates for the blog, which really do pull together useful information, tips about how to make the most of insights, events that you might be interested in participating, and that's all available from our digital student blog. That's that bottom link on that there, and the other link there relates to our digital community of practice for digital experience insights that you may wish to join. So I'll stop there and see if we have got any further questions. I'm just scanning back to see if there are any other questions.
Just to let everyone know that this presentation and also the recording, I'll send it out via GISmail. We can't send it individually to you because the system doesn't pick up on your email addresses. So yeah, if you look out for the next couple of days, you'll get you'll see through the GISmail list.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope that was useful just in terms of where we're at, how to get started, and if you have got any questions, please do get in touch with us. Mark is obviously here to support the analysis and the question design and that side of things. If it's more general query around the Insight service, please do get in touch with Ruth or myself. And Darren as well is there in terms of the help@gisc.ac.uk email that we can get back to you on. But if there's anything particular, I have made a couple of notes here in terms of some of the particular queries that we'll get back in touch with individuals on, that we'll follow up after the call as well. So thank you very much and good luck. I really hope that this has sort of given you the basics to get going now with Insights, and having seen the value of what institutions get from the process and the value of engaging students and staff in discussions around digital. It's really exciting when you start to see those survey returns come in and you start to pick up the themes, you start to see how you benchmark yourself against other institutions. It really does start to give us some really good evidence to know what we are doing and how we can do things better. So I hope you'll find it a really valuable process in working with us. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks for taking the time out.